This morning, what we're going to do is talk about the various types of funding sources available, how you can find and access those funding sources, how to properly vet grant opportunities and the likelihood of being funded, and I'm going to educate you about some other useful resources out there. Now, grant seeking, this is probably nothing that you don't know, but it is a very competitive, long and competitive process. It's a year-round process. There's no one time of the year that grants are more common than others. Some of them can be extremely tedious to prepare if you're dealing with a state or a federal grant. Some are extremely annoying if you do online applications and you got a character count of 200 characters and you're supposed to tell your agency's entire mission statement. By the way, it averages about 4 months before you see your first grant. Let me just tell you, I just last week received a grant, and we were dumbfounded. We had submitted it in September of 2014, so it was 13 months ago, and they just got a $10,000 grant. So that was a little nice surprise, needless to say. Stiff competition, obviously, since the downturn in the market. Since then, less money has been given away. What's happened is a lot of foundations have, cut back. They were cautious about their, portfolios, the value, and it just still, unfortunately, has not really recouped. Awards are sometimes smaller than you expect. You do a lot of work and you wind up with a $2,500 grant. So now for some people, some organizations, that might be considered good because you never got a grant before. But in others, they were hoping for a $10,000 or $15,000 grant. And needier causes, homeless shelters, food, these are easier to get grants for, I'm not going to lie. However, I will tell you, in 16 years of writing, I have never had a client that I didn't get a grant for. And I've had nursing homes, I've had environment, arts, all kind of groups. So what do you need to know before you begin your search? Are you looking for general operating, a program support, or capital project? I will tell you that programming, that's what most funders want to fund, is a program versus the overall agency. The general operating tends to be from major gift asks, so you talk and you meet with a major donor and they will give you this operating cost. Operating, of course, is what everybody wants. They want $25,000 a year just to go to the bottom line of the agency's operation. How much money do you need? Well, again, if you're looking for a major renovation, you're looking for a couple $100,000. This will, versus if you have a program, you would be happy maybe with that $5,000 gift. But that really depends because some funders will only give up to a $5,000 grant, and it will be listed on their website, like what their ranges are. How fast do you need the money? As I mentioned, usually the first grant comes about 4 months, 3, 4, 5 months before you see the first grant, and that's with putting out, maybe during that time you're doing, say, 4 grants a month, so before you see the first one. And what kind of support do you have to prepare the request? Is it just you, or do you have other people in your agency, an executive director, or the town clerk, or whatever to help put it together? Now, when looking at your sources, this is basically the rundown: federal, state, local funding. Local would be your towns and cities and county money, and then private foundations. We're going to go into a little bit more depth on those, and then other funding, and that's something that I always get excited about, and where I actually raise a lot of money from, and we'll talk about that. Federal funding, there's 26 federal grant-making agencies funding over 1,000 grant programs. Obviously, these are sizable amounts. These are those grants that you hear that are $500,000 grant. They're the toughest to get because you're competing with applicants across the entire country or submitting for the same one. They're a direct grant. They are, the agency will, let me back up. While some money is sent to the states to funnel down through the county, through, to local agencies, the ones I'm talking about here were federal ones that are directly given from the agency, from the U.S. government, directly to the nonprofit or municipality. They're usually for 501c3s and municipalities, and they can be single or multi-year grants. Federal grants are a year-round process, but most of the RFPs that they produce, and by the way, an RFP can be sometimes 100 pages for those that have ever thought about it. Just the directions are 100 pages long. You have to read through it. They mostly come out between April and mid-June. Not a surprise, it's after the federal budget goes into effect, so that's what that is. They take 30 to 45, they give you, 30 to 45 days to respond, and more, it's more like 30 days to respond. And the reason being is they want to cut down, the government wants to cut down on the competition, how many applications they're getting and that they have to read to. And it typically takes, I will tell you, 3 to 4 weeks to pull this together because you're pulling in a lot of people from all different parts of the agency or the municipality to put it together. And there's always several screeners, you've probably heard this term, where people in the industry are actually reviewing your application. A couple of tips with federal grants: ask for those resumes, letters of support, insurance on the first day. Inevitably, it will take you the 3 weeks before you get that support letter. A tip, those in the grant writing business, write the support letters for the people, and that's kind of standard practice. You can offer to write a support letter for the agency or whoever's going to partner with you or whatever. Do not wait to the last day to submit. Inevitably, the systems that we're going to discuss will go down. Don't assume your reader knows about your program and geographic area. I once had somebody tell this story, and it makes sense when you think about it. They had an application that had a travel budget in there of like $100,000. Well, guess what? It was a program in Alaska, and they literally, to do the programming, needed to take helicopters to the remote areas. So, don't assume that the person knows this. You write it in your copy that, why we're asking for an exorbitant amount of money for travel is because of this. And stuff. Follow the directions. And I know that sounds silly, but the government will knock you out if you just miss one thing. And if you don't have it, and these grants say 12-point times Roman, 1-inch margin around your copy. And if you try to do 0.9-inch margin or 0.95 to get a few more character counts in, you're going to miss that. Get your government officials' support. Okay, just to let you know, there's this system called SAM that basically all agencies must register with in order to get, and this is a tedious process. Needless to say, you have to upload all kind of documents on your agency or whatever. Now, searching for federal funding, there's a couple of ways to do this. The Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance and the federal grants website, grants.gov, is the #1 way. Just to show you fast, this is what it looks like. And by the way, the reason why I'm showing you these pictures, that if you want to investigate on your own, there are a lot of bogus websites out there, and you think that you're on a federal grant site, but searching site, but you're really not. This is what it looks like for the catalog, and you hit programs, and you can get a list of the current grants that are available going on. You can do an advanced search. Oh, by the way, follow the little red arrows. You'll see my red arrows throughout this whole thing. And you can then put in parameters, New York State, whatever, and see what comes out. The grants.gov, this is the main hub of all the activity here. That's what it looks like, and you have different ways to browse under search grants. You can browse by category, browse by agency there. If you notice there, you see environmental ones, whatever, and so forth. And that's what the page looks like under just one category, and it lists all. And if you click on them, you'll find the whole parameters and these, quote, RFPs on what is on the particular grant itself. All right, some additional ways to search for federal funding. There's private sites, and the two main ones that I've found and heard, Federal Grants Wire and federalgrants.com, or just look at the individual departments that you're looking for, the Fish and Wildlife, Department of Transportation, Recreational Trails Program. This is the Federal Grants Wire, what it looks like, and you see you can click on browse by subject, by applicant type, and that's where for-profit, non-profit are, municipalities and things along those lines. But this is what they look like, and if you look, you can click on the different categories there and open it up, and you will get listings. Federalgrants.com is another one. What's really weird is, well, you can see on the right side, startup funding, business grants for women, apply. But the category, the one that you want to look for is the one there, specific grant category. Sorry I'm rushing, I want to leave a lot of time at the end. You can go back and look at all of these more in depth, but want to get the questions. So you can see here the categories: science and technology grants, transportation grants, and you gotta get familiar with this and browse through them and see what's available. Or go directly to the site if you know a federal government site, and if you notice on the left side, buried on the copy, there is grants. So if you click on that, you'll find. Now, state grants. State grants are easier to get than federal, but they're fairly sizable grants. I mean, they can range from something like $20,000, but they can, right now the state of New York has one that goes up to $1 million for, you're gonna love this, infrastructure grants for nonprofit organizations. There's actually a funding stream available right now, and it's due in the end of December, like 23rd, so my Christmas, my holiday season's gonna be miserable this year. We're preparing those. They're typically less complicated than a federal grant, but they have been harder to get with the advent of the CFA system, Consolidated Funding Application, and I'll tell you about that in a second. They're relatively competitive because you are going against municipalities and nonprofits throughout the state. Searching for state funding. Grants Gateway, and that's the portal site there, is the primary way that lists the grants that are available within New York State, or you can look at the individual departments, Council of the Arts or the Office of Parks and Rec. Grants Gateway, you get familiar with that. They have that search tool. I think it was a little bit modeled after that federal grants system. So, and this has been a godsend, by the way, for us in the grant writing, because you have everything listed now all in one place. So you can search there, and you can put in your parameters. You can see all the agencies in New York State, click on it, and see what funding is in that category. So that's great. Another way is by search for the type of support that you're looking for: public safety, grants, family support, whatever. And then here's the clincher, the registration process. New York State has now, for most grants, it might even be all, that you must register with grants, register your agency with the grant in the Grants Gateway system in order to get a grant from New York State.